Hi there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to yet another cracking installment of the Map Round Show. This is the Built in California series. With me on the line from, of all places, California, is Josh Kline. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Matt. How you doing?
Yeah, good, man. Good and you.
Very well, thank you.
Cool, man. So we've got a lot to get into today. I think you're doing something truly novel and non-obvious for the world and in the world of startups. You are the founder and CEO of Have Need, which we're going to be talking about today, and all things entrepreneurial related, as far as your journey is concerned and that kind of thing. Let's kick us off. Give us the elevator pitch. What's your background? Because you've got a very interesting media background, from my perspective. So where does the
Yeah.
story actually start?
It starts very far from where it is right now. Um, Originally from Texas, but as a child moved out to Los Angeles. Families in the entertainment industry. After college, I went into the entertainment industry and I was working in film development and production, and then in TV and music video production, and just kind of made a left-hand turn at Albuquerque, uh, and ended up working in media tech through seeing some things that seemed kind of broken in the production pipeline. And a friend and I that met in production started a company, and we invented something called Digital Dailies, which might sound kind of obvious now when you talk about things that are unobvious. Back in 2000, the world was living on videotape and moving towards DVDs for distributing production media. And we created an online system, a secure online system where people in production could share media and collaborate on it. And that was kind of a game changer. So all film and TV production today uses some derivative form of what we created.
That's quite a claim to fame. How does it make you feel? Do you feel like you've achieved something of noteworthiness?
I feel like I should, but I did, continue on this path in media technology for, another 15 years. And I think it made for a fine career, and I've met some great people along the way. But it's in terms of achievement, it's not something that brought me some sense of great fulfillment. I got to a place where I felt like I wasn't really making an impact on the world around me. Like, people in production act like they're curing cancer every day, but they're not. We're making film and TV content. So I endeavored to figure out a way to be more impactful in what I did for a living, what I did with my work.
And this is a great point of departure to talk about Have Need. So I'm going to bring up your website for everybody. But what is Have Need's problem? What are you trying to solve? And maybe you could just paint a picture for our audience around the world. Like,
Yeah.
how did this whole thing come about? What's the context for it all?
Yeah. So it started with a desire to be more impactful. So that's very broad. And I don't come from the nonprofit and the charitable organization side of the world. So that's a very different animal to try to create a nonprofit. And I didn't have any experience in that. I had experience in technology, in enterprise and B2B technology. But I thought, well, there's billions of people who are coming online for the first time. They have smartphones and internet connectivity, and they have little or no cash. How do you help those people increase and improve their quality of life and make a business out of that at the same time? So that was kind of the razor's edge that I was trying to find a solution around. And that led me on sort of a mental discovery path, R&D, trying to figure out what could I build that would fulfill those requirements. And that led me into thinking about barter, which is an ancient form of commerce, goes back to at least as far back as ancient Egypt, around 6000 BC, that we know of. And people barter around the world every day, just in not any sort of way that you would describe as efficient. There are no purpose-built platforms on the consumer side. So I started looking into that. And there have been a handful of startups ever since the early aughts, frankly, that have attempted to sort of crack the code on consumer barter. And I had the benefit of hindsight and trying to figure out why they didn't work, because B2B barter is a very successful industry. It's a multi-billion-dollar global industry. It works quite well for businesses, but nobody's really figured out how to deal with consumer level barter, because people operate differently than businesses. And so I really started researching out that problem. And I spent a great deal of time doing it. I thought of this concept, or I started thinking about this in 2014. So this isn't like, I woke up 6 months ago wanting to change the world, and here's how far I've come. I really thought about this for a long time. I experimented with some things, basic architectures and earlier technologies, and I was methodical about this. And yeah.
So, Josh, why was it or has it been historically so difficult to crack? What's the reason for that? Because it seems to me like startups can crack a number of hard science problems like
Yeah.
nanotechnology, AI, ML, blah, blah, computer vision. But now you're saying like, well, hang on, but we has no one's. And then, by the way, there's marketplaces, which we all know about.
Yeah.
But then there's this barter marketplace, which is like, hang on, that I'm curious about that. I know my audience would be as well. So why has it historically been so hard to crack this barter marketplace idea?
So, yeah, marketplaces are hard on their own. So, I've bitten off a difficult thing to crack. Um, but the issue with barter is that it's almost like dealing with the laws of physics, the economics principle of the mutual coincidence of wants underlies successful barter. So that means we each have to have something the other person wants for there to be a trade. So I want your headphones, but you don't want my shirt. We do not have a mutual coincidence of wants. There is no trade to be had. So that barter experience failed. And through Web 1.0 and the rise of the internet, people had a belief that if you just brought it to internet scale, that problem would solve itself. That there would be so many people on the internet that eventually you would have enough people with offsetting haves and needs that it would succeed. And it turned out not to be the case. It's essentially like a law of physics. It cannot scale. You just scale the problem of there not being enough, mutual coincidences of wants. And so that's what I focused on. If I could figure out how to sidestep that successfully and negate that problem, I at least had a fighting chance to build a barter marketplace that could succeed in the consumer space. Now, there have been a couple of other startups along the way that tried novel ways of dealing with that, and they dealt with that in the way of applying like credits to things that you would contribute into the marketplace that you could spend elsewhere in the marketplace. So I would auction off my iPhone into this barter marketplace, and then I would get points for that or credits, and I could spend those credits elsewhere. And it's not a bad idea conceptually. That's how largely how the B2B barter exchanges work. The problem is, when I said earlier that businesses operate differently than people do, it's because businesses have credit, businesses have history, and there are barter exchanges, and the people who run those exchanges maintain the ledgers about who's contributing and who's taking goods out of the exchange. And so there are fairly rigid ways of operating in those systems. And people, consumers, don't operate that way. If I have an iPhone and I'm going to sell it essentially for some units of something, and I'm going to acquire something else with those units, I think we've shown that's eBay or Craigslist or OfferUp or one of the other secondhand marketplaces, because people as it turned out, don't really trust a startup as a store of value, right? That's something I had to avoid, was like, oh, we're going to store the value for you. You got to trust me. You've sent me your iPhone. You sent Josh Kline your iPhone. You got to trust me. I'm going to provide something of equal value to it or for it. So that was an issue. So the way I addressed it, my aha moment was, well, what if we could include multiple parties or multiple people in any one transaction, so that no two people would have to have directly offsetting haves and needs? So, for instance, I'm up for a trade with this shirt. You're up for a trade with those headphones, but you don't want to trade for my shirt, but you want to trade for somebody else's sunglasses. And that person has a pair of sunglasses, and they really like this navy blue crew neck t-shirt for some reason. Well, now we've got three people that have appropriate haves and needs that could be offset if there was a platform that would connect the three of us and present those trade options to us. You get the sunglasses you want, that other person gets the shirt they want, and I get the headphones I want. So that never existed before. And that was my aha moment. I bounced that off of a couple of people, my wife and other smarter people than me. And I got great feedback on that because nobody had ever seen anything like that. And then I was walking around my neighborhood, walking my dog with a friend of mine, a neighbor who's walking his dog, and I was telling him how excited I was about this idea. And he's a doctor, and he was not unexcited by what I was doing, but it wasn't a breakthrough idea to him because he said, "Well, yeah, that's how we do organ transplants." It is. So as it turns out, um, unbeknownst to me, about 20 some odd years ago, a team of economists was hired to build out the first organ transplant marketplace in North America, in a novel way, because in Western society, we are not allowed to use currency for organ transplants. We have found it, the term is repugnant. It is a repugnant concept. Um, and so they had to find a way to bring efficiency to reallocate the resources, and the resources were organs. And it used to be that if I needed a kidney and my wife or somebody in my family wasn't a match, I would have to sit on the list until unfortunately somebody else died and I was able to get one of their kidneys before I died. And so tens of thousands of people a year died while waiting on the lists. And so this economist named Alvin Roth um, led a team, and they built out an organ transplant marketplace. And it's all about multi-party matching. So if my wife's not a match, she can vouch a kidney into the marketplace. She promises that she will give her kidney to a match. And now I have a kidney credit in the marketplace. And so somebody else who's got a loved one that they're not a match to, who's vouched a kidney, I could match up with that person. But my wife doesn't need to match up with the person they know that needs a kidney. So these organ transplant chains, they call them chains, we call them barter loops. These chains go 30, 40, 50 people deep till everybody gets the kidney they need. It's changed the world. Tens of thousands of people a year survive because of this invention. And Alvin Roth won a Nobel Prize for inventing it. I don't expect I'm going to win a Nobel Prize for bringing barter to the consumer space, but I'm certainly inspired by his work.
Well, stranger things have happened. So, don't sell yourself so short. But I am curious about this because it is non-obvious, like as a solution to a problem.
Yeah.
And I'm a great believer in timing. I think Bill Gross did a talk. I don't know if you know who he is, but basically he's stupidly successful, built multiple unicorns. And he was like, he looked at all these startups, his own and others that had failed, and those that had also scaled. and become unicorns. He said, look, like there's team, there's execution, there's cash, there's all these things, product market fit, etc. But the number one reason that, in his view, that makes something really scale is timing. So if you're too early, or you're too late, you miss the opportunity. Or there's entrenched competitors that you can't compete with, or what have you. So, when is the timing right for something like this?
Yeah. So if you think about people who normally we think about who would need barter, who's most likely to trade for goods and services as opposed to acquire them. I think most people in the developed world that would be watching this would assume, well, that must be developing economies, right? And I think, I started with that mindset as well. Like if I could deliver, so, ultimately, if this is in use in sub-Saharan Africa and people who have like a shared phone in a village somewhere can use it to exchange goods and services, and it improves their quality of life, increases their access to resources, then I will have succeeded. But along the way, you learn some statistics and read some articles, and the world changes. And so some things are happening societally that are fascinating. One of my investors pointed me at an article that just prior to the pandemic, it was a Forbes article that highlighted that nearly 2 out of 3 Americans could not afford a $500 emergency without going into debt. So that's not something I see in my day-to-day life. Like most people I know could absorb a $500 emergency without borrowing money or having to put it on a credit card. But 2 out of 3 Americans, pre-pandemic, when things were going great, our economy was humming. So that opened up my eyes to this broad swath of the population that needs different tools, that needs different ways to acquire goods and services and trade goods and services. And so that was really important. And then the world kept changing in a number of ways. The pandemic was a massive disruptor, and the people who were economically disrupted and eviscerated are, legion. So, there's growth of all these barter groups online without any technology. So Facebook groups or Nextdoor groups and donation groups, and people finding ways to help other people in their community and reallocate resources in their community any way they can. So it's sort of like, I'll run somewhere to get there if I have to, but man, if I had a car, it'd be a lot easier, right? So that's what it is. Have need is the car that will get you to bartering a lot faster than if you've got to do it manually. The other thing that's happened societally is the push towards sustainability. Mm. And sustainability goes hand in hand with the growth, the explosive growth, frankly, of the secondhand economy. The secondhand economy, I believe the estimate for this year is about $180 billion. And that's Craigslist, eBay, OfferUp, Depop, The RealReal. There's no shortage of secondhand marketplaces. There's no longer a stigma about secondhand goods and services, or apparel, sporting equipment, things like that. And those were things that I'd embraced, I think, earlier than most. I think most parents, I've got now an 18-year-old son, but going from the size of nothing to 18 years old, kids grow out of a lot of things. And in our community, if we're going skiing, we're asking all of our friends, like, oh, he just outgrew his ski stuff. Does anybody have ski clothes or athletic equipment for whatever it is? Instead of having to purchase and then cycle through, maybe donate and then purchase again, donate, purchase again. It's a crazy cycle as parents. So those were early use cases that I thought about, things from my own life that were happening all the time. I thought to myself, well, wouldn't the ability to have a platform that would allow me to trade these things with parents that also needed things and had growing kids, wouldn't that help? So, societally speaking, um, timing tells me that the world's heading in this direction. Things are happening like the pandemic, but also sustainability is a much bigger issue now than it was 5 or 10 years ago. So we get the growth of the secondhand economy, we get people that are economically disrupted, and people that are looking for ways to barter. And I see it. I collect articles on the Have Need website, and I post articles from around the world, whether it's in America or Fiji. There's a Fijian Facebook group with over a barter group in Fiji with over 180,000 members. Like, it's all they do is barter. So I think about those use cases. Is my timing right? Can I address that use case? And so those are sort of the North Star kind of ideas that I'm trying to achieve.
Yeah, it's a great answer. I think timing is really important. I think one of the things, I mean, I got two kids. And just yesterday, I was taking out like the recycle bin and like going through like the billion of like Amazon boxes that clug up my garage every week.
Yeah.
And then there was like a bag of clothing there, So it's like, well, who's going to do something about that? It's not going to be me. I'm too busy. So my wife needs to sort that out. My point being, it's like it's a lost opportunity. There's someone that needs that stuff. And I think as parents, we spend thousands of dollars every year on cheap Chinese plastic that has a lifespan of like,
A billion years or whatever it is,
yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly. And like to your point, kids grow out of things. Like, Beyblade is like my son's thing right now. He's going absolutely crazy for Beyblades. And so, he's going to grow out of that. So what do you do with it? And I did a quick search just on Google here, just in Denver, got it up on screen for everybody. There's like a dozen secondhand stores, like retail stores, with with a great presence. In fact, there's 9 pages of options, which is crazy. So one doesn't, I think, fully appreciate like just how huge the secondhand marketplace is. I mean, even in Denver, if you drive around, you'll see people literally leave couches on the side of like outside their street, going,
Yeah.
so, and someone must come pick it up.
Yeah. So that's another use case we address, um, donation functionality, right? Broadening how you can donate items. So, I live, I think in any city, Denver's no different than LA. Like, you'll see a dresser or a couch in front of somebody's house. And that's just a subtle or not so subtle way of announcing this is available for free. Um, Please come take it. I remember years back, this was another use case that fed in from my own life experience. I had a dresser that I loved. I actually designed it and had it built. And then my wife and I remodeled our master bedroom. And now there wasn't a place. There just literally wasn't a place for this dresser anymore. And I listed it on Craigslist. There weren't that many options at the time, but I put it on Craigslist. And I thought for sure somebody's going to want to buy this thing. This thing's amazing. It's beautiful. Um, and after a couple of weeks, just no hits. And very quickly, I went from wanting some money for this thing to my primary need at that point became somebody taking it out of my house.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I had a problem is that like I wasn't prepared to put it outside of my house. It was actually like a really nice piece of furniture. I didn't want to throw it away. I didn't want it to end up in a landfill, and I didn't want to leave it outside. It wasn't a piece of IKEA furniture that was going to survive a hurricane. Um, I needed somebody to take it out of my house, and I wanted it to be put to use again. That was my goal. I wanted somebody else in my community to be able to use it. So that's something we support in the application as well. So you can list an item, say it's a physical item, instead of a service. You can list an item for trade, or you can just list it for donation. And then it's up to you. If multiple people are asking for it, you can decide who should get it. And it was actually quite touching. I donated. I had an old iMac that I'd listed for free. It was just on a shelf collecting dust, and I had somebody from Arkansas reach out to me and ask for it because they didn't have a computer and they were working on their mom's memorial service, and it was too hard to do it on their mobile phone. And if I could, you know, see my way to sending them the computer, they'd really appreciate it. So, this lovely woman paid for the shipping. I gladly boxed it up and sent her a computer. And that's one of those things. She's now part of my larger community, right? That's not a dresser. And it might be kind of an edge case to like box up a computer and ship it across the country for somebody. But the need was real. And I felt great about providing it to her.
Mm. So I'm going to come back to need because I think it's really important to learn for our audience on how you plan to scale this thing. So Facebook Marketplace, just to compare what you're doing versus what's currently in market, is riddled with fraud. Like if I have like tons of cameras here for it's my studio, like
Yeah.
from a studio from back home, and so I listed one of these cameras, and I think I got contacted about 8 times, and every single time it was fraud. So where there's a financial transaction on a marketplace like Facebook, where you have the entire world there,
Mm-hmm.
it's riddled with fraud. I hate dealing with Facebook Marketplace because of the experience that this platform or that platform creates. And I don't really like Facebook, period. Um,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, I get it.
but with what you're doing, I think is really interesting, right? Because it takes that away. You know what I mean? Because your matching engine is what's really proprietary here, and the multi-person transaction thing is also proprietary. But what it does, it removes, for me anyway, on the face value, it would seem to me like it would change the whole experience of what marketplace trading can actually be in the world.
Yeah, I hope that's the case, right? Like I've said, I had the benefit of hindsight to see what didn't work before Have Need. That's no guarantee Have Need's going to work, but if I have anything to say about it, it will. The issue about fraud, um, funny anecdote. We exited beta a couple months ago, and the first transaction on Have Need was somebody trying to scam me out of a used iPad. So by virtue of it being barter doesn't mean the fraud goes away. It's unfortunate because I'm an eternal optimist, and yet I also think there are plenty of people who aren't great. Anytime there's an opportunity to scam people, somebody will pop up and raise their hand and say, "I'll do it." So we're trying to address that in different ways, and we're certainly open to it. We open ourselves up to the problem through multi-party transactions that are going to be largely asynchronous, right? Like I've shipped you the shirt, or I've shipped the other person the shirt, and I'm waiting for the headphones from you. All of a sudden, I don't get the headphones, and I can't get in touch with you, but I've already shipped my shirt off to the other guy. That's a problem. Asynchronous transactions are tough, and so we're dealing with fraud in a couple of ways, and some are not proprietary, and some are. So we've just integrated what's known as digital ID verification technology. In banking, they call it, or other businesses, know your customer technology. So if you've got a crypto wallet, for instance, you don't go into a bank to open up your account. You hold up your driver's license, or you take a picture of it, and then you do a video selfie. In the background, all these checks are taking place, and databases are being checked, and the validity of the picture is being guessed or judged, and then you get scored, and then based on the score, you're verified or you're not. So that's not our technology. We've integrated a large provider of those tools. They're the people who do, if you lease a Tesla, that you'll go through the same process to verify your ID, your identification. So we're not going to make that mandatory, but we're going to strongly recommend it. So we've integrated that, and we're going to announce that in the next week or two. And we're going to strongly recommend that anybody who trades on Have Need goes through ID verification, and that if you're looking to trade with people, that you would look to trade with people who have also verified their ID. And the belief is not just on Have Need, but across, all the marketplaces that use tools like these, you're going to weed out 90+% of the scammers if you're only dealing with people that have held up their driver's license and announced exactly who they are, and it's been verified. Because scammers like to operate anonymously, and so there's no anonymity on Have Need. And then, as it is, like we demand a lack of anonymity, real name, real logins, verified. But now we take it another step further with ID verification. So we're very hopeful that that's going to weed out the vast majority of fraud. We are presently working with an insurtech company to develop transactional barter insurance. So that's something that doesn't exist. That's an insurance product that doesn't exist in the world today. And every startup that I researched that attempted to work in the consumer barter space talked about having insurance at some point, but nobody did it. So we're going to do it soon. And, my belief is that the combination of insurance and verified identity actually weeds out almost all fraud on this platform. Because
Cool.
by the way, you won't be able to insure a transaction unless you have verified yourself. That seems like a pretty fair trade-off to me.
It does. It does. Well, it can't be anything other than Facebook Marketplace. I'm in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Legit.
Yeah. I understand the frustration with Facebook Marketplace, because how many times you go on there and, I do a bunch of research on all the marketplaces about, what's there for free, what's there for trade, and all the things that say free, you open them up and it's like, it's just an advertisement from a business for something they're selling.
Yes.
Right. It's all bullshit.
Yeah.
Most of it's bullshit.
Quick question. You touched
Yeah.
on crypto just now. How do you see, or have you thought much about how a barter marketplace plays out in a Web3 context? Because it seems to me, take Facebook Marketplace, for instance, Web2, right? And so if you think about trust being the underpinning currency of a transaction, in a Web3 world where you have decentralized trust, communities with a greater sense of ownership, collaboration, transparency, etc., it seems to me like what you're doing, in the next few years, would have a very interesting space to own, as a barter marketplace that's Web3 enabled. What do you agree with that? And have you thought much about it? Like, how do you see Have Need playing out in that context?
Yeah, I for sure have thought a lot about it. And it started with the fact that nobody was talking about blockchain when I thought of Have Need back in 2014. And then in 2017, we were building in earnest, and blockchain was a topic. And I had to defend to investors and potential investors why I hadn't scuttled the original architecture and re-architected on blockchain. And so decentralized systems in this particular space benefit the community when there's one player that is, deriving too much benefit from the community, extracting too much benefit from the community. So if I control the valuable resource, whether it's information or anything else, and the fees that I was charging to access that resource were too great. I mean, this is the idea between, fiat currency and cryptocurrency. The banks all take their fees. It's inefficient. Money transfers are expensive. So cryptocurrency cuts through all that, or most of it. Brings its own problems with the environment and things of that nature. But the idea is that it would make more efficient transfer and reallocation of funds. And nobody trusted the banks after 2008, 2009. So in the case of Have Need, we're not extracting much, if any, value from these transactions. In fact, it's free right now. We'll start monetizing at a very low rate starting next year. But, we're not taking value from the community. We're enabling the transfer of goods and services without cash. So we're creating value for the members. Um, I can see down the road, uh, so, if we get to a place where we're enabling higher and higher value transactions, and that's the goal, right? We're starting. I don't assume that. By the way, there's a car on Have Need. There's at least 3 motorcycles right now. So people are testing the waters to see, like, well, what could I get for this? And that's kind of the idea. You can list your haves and needs, or you could just list some haves and test the waters. What could I get for this? So once we start doing higher value transactions, one could argue that different systems are perhaps more efficient than a centralized arbiter of those transactions. And I'm very open to the concept of implementing blockchain and smart contracts to control those transactions. If you think about where we're at today, if I'm transacting a 5-6 year old used iPad that I don't use anymore, and I'm trading that for somebody to come do some touch-up paint on the outside of my house, whatever that some low value transaction, what value do the users derive from that being on blockchain, on any blockchain? And I would argue none, right? It's not worth the ticket to re-architect Have Need for those use cases. It only becomes worth it when we're dealing with much higher value transactions, vehicles, land, real estate, things of that nature. And I'm very open to it. I think about it a lot. And it would be fantastic for Have Need if that becomes an issue. That means it's working.
Yeah, absolutely. So you are in a raise currently, and I speak to basically founders every day, and pretty much everyone's in a raise mindset all the time.
Yeah,
It's
that's the
like,
way I feel. I'm always in a raise.
dude, it's like, yes, yes, the answer is yes, I am. I'm in a raise.
I love the founders who say I'm not raising right now.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I'm good.
Okay, that's a cute game.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They do exist, though. They do exist.
Yeah.
So you're in this raise at the moment. Everybody knows that the cost of capital now seems to be a lot higher than it was a year ago, and the markets, everyone's a little bit, of investors specifically, are being more selective than they were. Let's just say 1 or 2 years ago. What is your current experience in raising money in the market today? How tough is it to raise capital? What's your advice to a founder who's looking to raise?
That's a great question. So I'm in the pre-seed stage. So we've just launched. iOS is in the App Store. Android's coming in the next week or two. So this is an early round. And we've raised about $500,000 so far. And I didn't find that money easy to raise. So this is my third startup. My first one we bootstrapped for most of the time, ended with a successful exit. The second one I raised pretty quickly, $13.5 million. That one didn't end well. So, funny disparity between having no money and a lot of money, different outcomes, inverse what one might think. And on this one, it's a novel idea, and so it's a difficult raise no matter what. So the $500,000 we raised already, those are people either that know me and believe in me and or the idea, or they're 1 degree off, and people that know me brought friends of theirs into this opportunity. I don't have any institutional capital in the company yet, but that the goal is to change that for this round. I think it is difficult. There's a prevailing gloom at the moment, but I'm an optimist. I think I've got an opportunity here to change the world in a particular way and have a very positive outcome for both the end users of the platform and for my investors. So, I started raising money before the gloom, and it wasn't easy. It just is what it is. I'm also at a stage which is a little different than the later stages. From what I'm reading, the later stages are having more difficulty. So if you're out there raising a Series A or a Series B and you need 10 or 30 or $50 million, you've really got to be achieving some very positive metrics that make it very obvious that that investment's going to work. I'm at a phase where a lot of people have moved from, successful angels into their pre-seed funds. They've raised a few $1 million. They went from angel to super angel, and now they've, formalized the investment vehicle into these like pre-seed funds. And those funds have to use it or lose it, right? And they've got generally need to deploy that capital in a period of a couple of years, or they have to give it back. So, I'll circle back with you in a couple of months and let you know how it's going. But I know that there are some sustainability and or marketplace oriented pre-seed funds out there, and they'll all be hearing from me. So, you know what? If they don't want to invest in it, we'll keep pushing forward, and we'll get to a place where it'll be so obvious they'll have to.
So my thing there is like, you don't ask, you don't get. You know,
Yeah,
if you don't look
that's
for the
right.
park, another one. If you don't look for the parking spot right outside the front, you never get it.
Yeah,
You know.
that's a great analogy.
So it's
And
like
by
all
the
the
way, I
car.
tell my son that quote all the time. Don't
Oh, you do.
ask, don't get.
Oh, really? Yeah, because
Yeah.
it's true, right? I mean, like you go to the parking lot or a shop, and there's tons of cars. So those cars, in this analogy, are startups. The shop is like a venture fund. So you got all these cars trying to get into the shop, right? To get the shop to basically back them.
Hmm.
And so if there's no point in really, from a mindset perspective, sitting at the back when there's a parking spot right up front. You have to actually look and believe that it's there. So if
Yeah.
you don't, and as you say,
Somebody's getting that spot.
someone is,
Why
someone's
not
get,
you?
dude, someone's gonna get it, man. Like
Yeah.
there was a company in Web3. Now Web3 is like, there's big question marks about it. Period, in terms of timing.
Yeah.
The company is called Y Whales. So it's a community basically. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it, but anyway, point being, they raised $5 million like this week for Web3 that hasn't really happened yet. So you know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
if they were like, oh, it doesn't really happen yet, it's not the right time. It's like, okay, well,
And there, boom, 5 million bucks.
yeah, kumbaya, and like no revenue, no nothing. You know what I mean? So it happens. You have to believe that it is
Yeah.
possible. But let's say, Josh, that you are successful. I'm pretty sure you will be. But let's say that you do raise this round and you go on to raise consecutive rounds, you start to scale this thing, what have you. What's the vision and or difference that you see this platform making around the world? What does that look like?
Yeah. So here's the down the road vision. Scale, I see this as reintroducing barter, not displacing fiat currency. And we'll see what happens with cryptocurrency. It's not displacing other currencies. It is including barter as a meaningful component of the consumer economy. That's it. I think of it as the grout around the tiles. There are all these use cases for which barter is very efficient and for where the people don't have cash to engage in the economy. So it doesn't displace, maybe you going and buying another camera, but maybe you could camera you don't use anymore for something. So in terms of scale, I think about this as the eBay of barter. That's where I want to see it go. I want to see it have a global footprint. It's certainly not designed just to be a North American or an American platform. I mean, the app's available now in all of the English language app stores. So it's about a half dozen, but the goal is really to localize this around the world and have need available in every major language. Um, and then in terms of impact, which is the impetus for the whole thing, there's a direct connection between having a successful consumer business and delivering impact. And that is, I'm committed to always availing the platform to charitable and nonprofit organizations for free for those use cases. So if you're dealing with a large NGO or charitable organization, similar to Facebook groups, like we enable private barter groups. So that could be a barter group of many thousands of people. But if you're a charitable organization, you'll onboard the people you want to invite into that group. And as long as they're in your group, they won't pay for transacting. When we start monetizing, like I said, it'd be a very low dollar or two per transaction fee. If you're in the private group of the charitable organization, there will be no fees whatsoever. So the more successful have need is on the consumer side, and the more awareness there is of the consumer availability of the platform, the more we can deliver that platform to charitable organizations. There's a novel customer acquisition strategy there, which is we're making a valuable tool available to charitable organizations for free. They're onboarding their members, but when their members then decide to transact outside of that private group as regular consumers, then we monetize them there. That's an opt-in. They don't have to do anything. But if they decide to then step outside of the private group and transact elsewhere, then they're just a regular consumer. And then, we'll monetize that activity at that point. And we'll share that revenue back with a charitable organization. So we create this virtuous cycle where, we have third parties that are motivated to onboard people onto our platform, and they benefit from it. Their members benefit from it, have need benefits from it. So I think we have a very unique customer acquisition strategy, and we're just starting to actually see how that's playing out. We're just starting to onboard our first couple of impact partners, and so I'll stay in touch with you. I'll let you know how it's going.
Josh, very quickly, two things. One, what's been your biggest learning in the process of building this startup to date? What shines for you as a key learning that you want to share with other founders?
I think that among the investor community, pattern recognition is a cancer. People say, "Oh yeah, I've seen all those. I've seen that." And as human beings, we all rely on pattern recognition. It's what has kept humans alive for millennia, right? Oh, I hear a sound that sounds like a saber-toothed tiger on the other side of this wall or the other side of this hill. I'm going to go the other way. But, I've had with existing investors, I've had to explain how have need differentiates from everything that came before, sometimes 2 or 3 times. And then you see the light bulb go off like, oh, I get it. Oh my God, that's amazing. Okay, so people rely on pattern recognition, and it's frustrating. So for other founders, it's frustrating. So you need to be patient. If you have something novel and it's valuable, you'll either get, obviously, like anybody, through a lot of no's, not for me, or no, because I've relied on pattern recognition to inform my decision, even though I'm wrong about what I'm saying no to. So if you can see that pattern recognition is working against you, you've got to be able to slice through that and explain why you have differentiated from the things that they're associating you with.
Very good. Very good advice. Final question, and then we'll wrap this up. What do you need help with?
Well, it's broad spectrum, really. We're a startup. It goes from fundraising. I'm reaching out and speaking with investors pretty much every day. And like we talked about a little bit before, I'm always fundraising. From the moment I decided to do this as a business, even if I've just taken in 6 figures from somebody, I'm still fundraising. Until the point that we're cash flow positive, I'm fundraising. But then, this is a consumer platform. I want people to use it. It's critically important that people use it, and also that they understand how it differentiates. And that's my job in marketing it, how it differentiates from other platforms. Because I see people download the app, install the app, and if you say 100% of people that are my users, and then I look at the percentage of people who have posted a have and or a need, and that percentage is much smaller. So I understand that they're going into the app and they're thinking about it more like a traditional marketplace, like an OfferUp or some other mobile marketplace. or I'm going to pop in here and see what's available for me.
Mm.
And that's not the way it's designed. You can do that. You can go in and scroll through, but it's designed for you to add haves and or needs. And when this patented technology we've developed, this matching engine, will then surface trading opportunities for you. That's the magic. So that's the message that it's mine and my team's job to communicate as effectively as possible. Frankly, we're just getting started. We've only been out of beta for about 3 months now. So lots of marketing experiments, a lot of communications experiments. This is very helpful. I love being on your podcast. Very helpful to me to help get the word out. So
You're
that's it.
welcome. Well, Josh, it's been a privilege, man. I'm super excited to see where you and the Have Need team goes. I mean, I think you're on an awesome mission. I'm a believer. I'm sure you'll be successful in your next raise and the one after that and the one after that. But thank you for being on the show. It's been a privilege to give you a platform to tell your story.
It's been my privilege. Thank you very much, Matt.
All right, Josh. Cheers, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.